There are dog trainers who throw a chain collar on a dog or a prong collar or a shock collar and just cause pain after pain, start yanking their necks, start shocking them. This is how dog training has been done for decades, by and large.
Hello and welcome to my show. My name is Rishanka Jones, and today I have with me Zak George. He has a very successful YouTube channel where he gives tips and tricks on how to train your dog using empathy and positive reinforcement. So let's welcome Zak and dive right into it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be here.
No, it's an honor to have you on the show. I'm so excited. It's a topic that I've always been curious about because I have a dog. So I would love to learn some tips and tricks from you today.
What kind of dog do you have, by the way?
I have a Shih Tzu.
Lovely. Love them. I love all dogs, but yeah, it's always fun to picture them and understand better.
All right, Zak, let's start with the basics. I want to focus on the questions that most people have in their mind when they're thinking of getting a dog. So when a person gets a new puppy, what are few foundational skills that they should teach that puppy? And what's the first thing they should do before they begin training?
So I'm going to take that in reverse, actually, because I
Yeah.
love the way you asked that question. By far, the most important thing is when a person gets a new dog is to prioritize the bond with that dog, getting to know that dog. The fastest way I know of is to get them playing with you. Tug of war, for example, chasing a toy in the living room. Plato, the famous philosopher, has a famous quote that I like to use a lot. And it goes along the lines of, you can learn more about a person in an hour of play than you can a year of conversation. And I think that applies to our dogs too. We learn so much about them. And I mean, I wouldn't prioritize like skills like sit and stay and down for the first several weeks. That's not to say you can't work on them. You should work on them, but we're not going to hold them to the high standard of, well, I taught you how to sit. I taught you how to lie down. I taught you how to do a 5-second stay in the living room. So I expect it every time now. You know, you kind of dabble with these things while you're getting to know the dog, but we want to give our new dogs kindergarten, first grade before we start going into 8th and 9th grade and into college and so forth, if that makes sense, if you get my metaphor.
Yeah, I think that makes so much sense because that's exactly what we did when I got my dog. We played with him a lot. And I think that's all we've done. We've just played with him till now. There's been less training and more play.
I'd rather hear that than the other way around, quite honestly. I mean, I know the reputation of many dog trainers is to be super strict with your dog, make sure they listen to you all the time. That's one of the things we're trying to change in the dog training field. We have a very anti-colonial version or approach to dog training that isn't simply based on submission, domination, and suppression. So we want the dog to feel free to be who they are and teach them how to interact in our world in a way that gives them joy and brings us joy too.
That makes sense. But there's nature versus nurture, right? Similar to our children. There's so many times you could try your best with your dog, but they are just genetically more aggressive or are stubborn and do not want to listen. I'll give you an example of a dog not following house rules or being aggressive around food and children. And this has nothing to do with the human's lack of showing compassion or having playtime. How do you deal with such a dog?
So you mentioned genetics. Genetics do matter with dogs. However, and look, this is controversial in my field, what I'm about to tell you. I don't think they come into play anywhere near as much as people think they do as it relates to basic training issues. We're very tempted a lot of times to be like, oh, well, they're just a blank breed, so that's why they can't learn this or that or whatever. At their heart, dogs are still mammals. They still are highly, highly intelligent animals. They still have a neocortex. They're brilliant, brilliant animals. So they can learn a lot. So I typically, when I hear a dog is being stubborn, it simply means that the person has not yet learned how to connect with the dog. Now, that doesn't mean that some dogs aren't more challenging than others. Certainly that is true. And trying to match that dog's style is important. It's really important that we are working with the dog in front of us, that we're always compassionate with that dog, and that we consider each individual dog as an individual more than a breed. And so we need to start with that mindset, because maybe the way we approach dog training with the dog that we had in the past, it's completely different with this new dog. Those people who have had multiple dogs out there will know exactly what I'm talking about. No two dogs are the same. And so they all require a unique approach, I think. Does that answer your question?
Kind of, yeah. I still feel like, what do you do when there's no other solution?
Oh, there is
We're a
another
dog
solution.
trainer.
Yeah. Well, okay. So if a dog trainer doesn't know what else to do, their job is now to find another dog trainer who may specialize in that area. When you think you're at the end, when you think, you know what, I've tried everything, what you do is you make whatever you're doing easier for the dog. We call it, I'm going to use some jargon here, we call it splitting criteria, right? So say we're teaching a dog how to stay, for example, and they keep breaking stay after 5 seconds, right? Well, let's go for a 2 second stay and catch them succeeding and build that solid. Maybe that's too much. Maybe that even that's not working. All right, give me a 1 second stay. Let's find a reason to mark that, give them a yes, follow it up with a treat or a toy or something that that dog really values. In terms of potty training, we could do a whole podcast on that.
On that.
But
Oh,
the
yes. And I'm going to
bottom,
come to that.
sure.
What about older dogs? A lot of people these days have started adopting dogs, which I feel is such a wonderful thing to do. And a lot of these dogs have been abandoned because of sometimes behavior issues, health issues, or whatever it is. Is it too late to train such dogs? And if not, where should one begin?
Great question. No, it is not too late to train any dog in order to help people, because you're right. It's a famous cliche. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. You've often heard, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
This could not be farther from the truth, though. In the same way that an adult person can learn algebra for the first time, just like a child can, so too can a dog learn how to listen, learn how to connect, and learn how to understand a human. Of course, that takes a very patient approach, regardless of the age. Doesn't mean that you're not going to have to overcome a lot of undesirable habits maybe that the dog has, and it does take a little extra work to change a habit, like it does with a person too. But really, what I always tell people is, like, if you're not a professional dog trainer, you really want to know the right headspace to be in when you're teaching a dog. Just use the same part of your brain that you would use if you were trying to teach a 3-year-old child something. You'd be very patient. It's amazing, like, how high our standards are for a dog that's been on the planet like 180 days. And look how patient we are with children who've been on the
Babies.
planet for years and years. You know what I mean? So we have to get that perspective in place too.
Wow, that's a wonderful way of thinking about it. Because I have children and I have dogs, and I see my patience level is so different with both of them. So it is possible to train senior dogs or older dogs or dogs that have been abandoned who've had like a traumatized past. Do you think that showing compassion is the first step in this process, especially when a dog is very aggressive? Because, if an aggressive dog comes to my house, I've adopted an aggressive dog, I would be scared. And I know dogs pick up on that energy. How do you go close to that dog and kind of calm the whole situation down?
Okay, so you talked about compassion. Should compassion be involved there, and when we're working with a dog who has aggression issues? Compassion should be involved at every stage of working with our dogs, regardless, for the rest of their life, obviously. We have to connect with these animals as the intelligent, sentient, living, thinking, breathing beings that they really are. In terms of aggression, this is something that really is not well understood in the public at all. And this is something I'm going up against a lot in my industry, because most dog trainers aren't really qualified to deal with aggression. There's no qualifications to be dog trainers here in America where I am. So anyone can call themselves, which means you get everything under the sun. And people just, we might get into that later. We'll see. But aggression is not a character flaw. The vast majority of dogs who are behaving aggressively are doing so because they're unsure about something, because they're fearful of something. So our job with a dog who is feeling insecure isn't to punish them and scold them until they stop behaving aggressive. It's to make them feel secure. That's our goal. And so once we can really make our dogs feel secure, which is easier said than done a lot, it really depends on the issues with the dogs, right? But our goal is to understand that we really have to make that dog feel secure at all turns. That means controlling the environment when we're working with them, not putting them in an environment that's likely to trigger them. We have to take some responsibility as people to try and keep that dog what we call under threshold, in a place where they can absorb your requests, in a place where they can absorb the communication that you've built. Like if a dog is over threshold, that means there's something in the environment that has caused them to be in a place where they can't focus, they can't listen to you, because that thing has set them off, because they're fearful, because they don't know what to make of it, because they're excited, because they're frustrated. There's a number of emotions here, but we always want to address the underlying causes with dogs. And we never want to use violence to meet aggression because the evidence is crystal clear that that does not address the underlying cause of the dog feeling insecure.
I think it probably leads to more aggression then.
It does. Yeah.
Can you walk me through like an example on how to deal with a dog who's aggressive around resource guarding or aggressive around its food? If you could just give an example of how one should deal with that situation.
Oh, great question. Yeah. This is one of the more common forms of a dog behaving aggressively. See, I don't call dogs aggressive dogs. Dogs behave aggressively based on a certain context. So, in
Yeah.
the case that you've brought up, say a dog's got a bone they're chewing on or something they really value, and then you get close and they start, you see the body language, you see them raising their gums and showing their teeth, you hear the growling, and it's very evident that dog is protecting something that they value. Now, here's where genetics does come into play. That is very genetic, not for any particular breed, but for virtually all breeds of dogs, right? And
Yeah.
so, what is the dog feeling in that stereotypical case? Well, typically they're feeling, I don't want to lose this thing that I value. Perfectly
Mhm.
natural. So, that's why we don't want to just reach in and take it and verify their fear. So, the way that I deal with this is so simple, so easy, and so effective with the vast majority of resource guarding. I will approach first, what I'll do is I'll drop some very good treats. I'll actually typically use something like real boiled chicken, something really good, not just a standard dog treat. And I'll just drop it on the ground and I'll go to that side of the room and drop it on the ground. And then maybe that's not enough to distract them to abort the bone that they're guarding. So maybe I might start raining chicken as I approach the bone. And you can imagine if a dog is like, okay, this person is raining chicken, there's chicken everywhere. You've now de escalated that dog significantly. Chances are the overwhelming majority of dogs are going to be like, let me get this chicken. That allows you to pick up the bone now. And then do you know what I do once I pick up that bone? I give it right back to them to communicate. I'm not here to take what you value. I'm here to work with you. I'm your partner. I love you. I trust you. I understand you. And so this is something you do several times, but that usually nips most resource guarding issues in the bud pretty early. And if I can contrast that with traditional dog training, if you've seen TV shows before, social media is loaded with it. There are dog trainers all day long who throw a chain collar on a dog or a prong collar or a shock collar and just cause pain after pain, start yanking their necks, start shocking them. This is how dog training has been done for decades, by and large. There are good dog trainers out there, but most of them are unqualified. And that, of course, makes the issue worse because we validate their fear.
That is such a wonderful example. And I didn't know that dogs loved boiled chicken that much. And I'm going to be coming to the kinds of food we should be giving them. But in this particular example that you gave, if a dog had an object that they're not supposed to have, for example, a crayon that was fallen on the floor or something that's going to make them sick, a piece of chocolate or something, you drop the chicken bits, they follow the chicken, you pick up the piece of chocolate. Do you give that back to them?
No, of course not. And actually, in an emergency situation, you really have to do what it takes, particularly if it's life threatening. You're not going to run to the fridge, get some chicken, and drop it in front of them. That's why it's really critical that we teach our dogs the leave it skill early on. So this is not a new concept to them. In other words, in all things dog training, we don't want to wait until something we don't like happens organically to then try to resolve it with our dog. So leave it. That's where I can drop a piece of chicken on the ground now and say, leave it alone, please. Look at me instead. Yeah, I like that. I like that you listen to me. That's a skill that we teach that I typically will introduce to dogs, as I said, very early on, and then just continue to practice the first couple of years of their life. So when you drop medication or the chocolate or the remote, your dog now has a history, something to fall back on where they understand what leave it means, assuming you've practiced it. But like a lot of people will practice these things. They'll go to a dog training class, their dog will do well, and then they kind of forget about it. You do need to, got to keep your dog sharp, got to practice a couple times a day. That first 2 years is really critical with dog training. It really is.
So, for example, if you've passed those years and now you're trying to figure out the leave it trick, what's the quickest and easiest way to teach them that trick?
Oh, well, really what I do? I mean, let's see. Pretend this is a treat here, right? I'll put it here. Yes. They left it alone for a half a second. You see what I'm saying? That's where I start. And then I don't even pull the treat away. I'll present the treat, say yes, and give it to them. I'll get into a rhythm, tiny treats, yes. And then I start slowing down, yes. And then I start showing it to them, yes. And then all before you know it, they're just sitting there waiting. Okay, when do I get it? And then you start dropping it in front of them. Things with motion really start to throw dogs off. Things that move around are more exciting to dogs. So you want to prep them for these things that are definitely going to happen in their life. You want to have exercises like Leave It, where you've practiced it in a situation that is likely to exceed anything they would do in real life. Back when I used to do dog training classes, I would go on the morning news, to try and get customers for my dog training classes. And I would bring sometimes a big chicken breast, and I would set it down in front of my dog and I would say, leave it alone, and just walk away while I did the interview, while it remains on the ground. You know what I mean? And that is one of the easiest things to train out there, yet it impresses people like you would not believe. It is not a difficult skill. But yeah, I've got videos all over my YouTube channel. You can just Zak George Leave It in YouTube.
Yeah, I need to check those out. So just this example that you gave with the yes, what is the yes? What context are you saying yes in?
I'm so glad you asked that. So in dog training, we have what we call marker words. And I'm going to avoid using too much jargon, don't worry. But the word yes simply means to our dogs, yes, I like what you did. You get a prize. So in the way I teach a dog what the word yes means is and I do usually do this in the first few days of working with a dog. I don't consider it hardcore training or anything. I'll just say yes, give them a tiny treat, something good, because I don't want to get them fat. I don't want to overfeed them, right? But I'll say yes, treat. Yes, treat. You do that for 2 minutes or less. Your dog is going to learn very quickly. When I hear that word, it means I'm getting a treat. Now, once they understand that, it's very simple. Anytime I catch them succeeding at anything, you cannot over yes your dog, right? You can't reinforce too much. In fact, the more you reinforce, the better. It is dose dependent. But anytime you catch anything your dog is doing that you like, you say yes. See, this is the 180. This is the 180 that most people don't realize. Most of us think, what do I do when my dog screws up or does something I don't want? And really, what we have to change our thinking. Let me find my dog succeeding, even if it's for tiny bits at a time. And that's where you get your foot in the door.
Wow. So how do you relate this yes reward to Leave It?
Oh, so when we catch them leaving it, so in the case of the treat here, it's if I can say yes before they even go for it, I've caught them succeeding for a fraction of a second. So yes, right? You see what I mean? So I get that just a little.
So he leaves the object and then comes for the treat.
Well, no, I'm saying I like to teach it with a treat in the beginning.
Okay.
You see what I mean? First, I want to teach them how to leave a treat alone. But let's say I'm trying to teach them how to leave this alone, right? So it's, here you go. I'm going to show it. They leave it alone. Yes. I only need to get them before they have a chance to process that they're even leaving it alone is where I need to get in their head. And then they're going to catch on very quickly. I'm just going to add a half a second to it over the next minute, then another second. And before you know it, your dog will leave it alone. When I used to teach live classes, I would tell people before the end of this class, every one of you is going to be able to drop real chicken in front of your dog and have them leave it alone without laying a finger on them or pulling them back in any way.
Wow.
It is really that easy because everyday people can do this. And,
so anyone who has a dog needs a lot of chicken in the fridge.
Yeah, or something your dog likes. I also, I use a lot of high quality dog treats too. Freeze-dried chicken, Pupford's one of my sponsors, BarkBox is one of my sponsors, and they make pretty high quality treats too. Sometimes it's not convenient to carry around wet chicken with you. But, if you really need to get through to your dog, that often is a way to do it.
Awesome. So, you talked about the shock collars and the prongs and all of that. What about being an alpha in the house? Do dogs listen to the alpha personality the most?
I love these questions you're asking because you're really hitting at the core of what so many people are wondering. For years and years, we've heard TV personalities say, all you got to do is show your dominance and be the alpha. And earlier I spoke of how we aim to decolonialize or decolonize dog training and be anti-colonial in our approach. See, being dominant, intimidating dogs, showing them who's boss, these aren't based in science. No, to be clear. This is rooted in, honestly, colonization. in the way that we have treated people in the past. We've used dogs as weapons of war, and we that might be another topic completely. But my point is that those myths of being dominant, being the alpha, all come from exercising force and domination of those viewed as weaker than us. And
Hmm.
that is a very common trend in American culture, especially, or not trend, it is who America is, quite honestly. And so we have to look at things differently because we know there's side effects to it. We know
Yeah.
there's side effects when you use abusive methods. And, most dog trainers wouldn't say they're being abusive when they're jerking a dog around by the neck, but the evidence would suggest otherwise.
You could be strict and be a disciplinarian and not traumatize the dog, right? There's a nicer way to do it. How do you do that?
Well, I don't really think of terms in discipline or not being disciplined. I mean, I guess that can mean different things to different people. What I do look at it as, like the traditional way that outdated dog training would do it is they would jerk a dog around by the neck, right? As if to suppress behavior. So, in lieu of that, what we want to do is we want to motivate our dog from the inside outward. Rather than trying to take behavior from our dog by jerking them around or shocking them with a remote control, we want to earn the behavior to motivate them to perform it from the inside out. We call that intrinsic motivation, to want to do the thing. So if you can make a dog to want to do something, well, that's a lot easier than making them do something they don't want.
So you don't need to be alpha
No,
or
that's a complete myth. That's been extensively debunked scientifically, the alpha myth. That stems from a study on captive wolves, I guess in the 60s, that has even David Misch, who published some of those early studies, later would recognize as being deeply flawed. But the dog training industry ran with it. Why do you think they ran with it? Well, I think they ran with it because American culture prioritizes domination and suppression of animals viewed as weaker. And I think that's why we still see it persist.
yeah, that
Yeah.
is really sad.
Yeah.
All right, some common dog problems that we all deal with on a daily basis. The most frustrating one is house training. You house train a dog and then they go back to having accidents in a house. It can be very frustrating, makes the human angry. How should one deal with those situations?
So house training, pretty simple actually. Now, I should have said this with aggression earlier, but it applies to house training
Mhm.
as well. We want to have, if it seems completely unusual, nothing's changed in your dog's life and it's out of the blue, it could be a medical issue. So, definitely rule that out before any training approach. That's true with aggression. That's true with house training. That's true with a lot of things. Another common reason that dogs regress on house training is because you move or you go to a
Mm.
friend's house where they don't know the rules. So just because a dog is house trained in one place doesn't automatically mean they are house trained everywhere at first until they get some life experience. But if you are having problems just from the get go and the dog, it's like, I thought I was getting there, but now everything's just going to, what, then, what I recommend is taking a step back like I would with anything and starting over and just being like, all right, assuming there's nothing medical here, maybe it's something I'm doing wrong. Take your dog out every 30 minutes when you're at home and focus on acknowledging, yeah, I like that when you go outside. It's really just a matter of building the habit and getting them to go out. Too often we have the attitude, especially with a dog who isn't fully house trained, like, okay, I took you out for 5 minutes, you didn't go, and now you came inside and peed. If that's a routine habit and the dog comes back inside and you see and they're likely to pee, well, number one, maybe you need to put them on a leash again while in the house during this process so you can make sure they don't slip away, right? To make sure that you have control of the environment. And then go out 10 minutes later until that happens. So, what I mean, basically, in a nutshell, take your dog out way more often than you think you need to. And you'll probably see this start to get resolved in a couple of weeks, unless there's something else.
What about on leash versus off leash? Some dogs just prefer being off leash when they go out and run around and they know their way back home and they kind of come back. Do you think that's a bad habit?
Probably, yeah. Now, maybe this is my cultural bias here, living in the city, being an American where we're not supposed to let our dogs roam everywhere. So I'm willing to check my bias there because it depends on a lot of the cultures we live in too. Different cultures are just fine with dogs being off leash. You might be able to see behind me. I have a very busy road. I don't want my dog running around here.
Sure.
But yeah, I think I think being off leash is great. I think off leash time is very good for dogs to have, whether it be in a fenced backyard or they have places these days you could rent for an hour at a time to go give your dog some off leash time if you don't have your own yard. So, from a dog trainer's perspective, I like that you're asking this because I feel myself being torn between like how I would train a dog versus how different cultures might be involved here. And so I like that you're kind of uncovering that a little bit here. But no, in my case, no, I don't want my dog going anywhere because they can get into bad things, they can come across danger. And if I'm not there, there's not much I can do to keep them from, consuming something that might be bad for them or running into danger. So I think it's important that dogs remain in our custody where we can exercise them responsibly and free from danger, but willing to consider other perspectives on that if I've overlooked something.
Yeah. Moving on to anxiety, stressful behaviors. So many times we have to travel, we leave our dogs with sitters or we just leave them alone at home, and that kind of triggers a lot of anxiety and stress. What are few early signs in dogs that they're like developing an anxiety disorder or, and they need medication for it?
That's a good question. So, if they need medication for it, that's beyond my qualification. That's where I would recommend them to a veterinary behaviorist, someone who's qualified to understand that. Um, the way that I, as a trainer, will deal with most cases of anxiety is trying to address the underlying issue. Why are they feeling anxious? Is it because they just don't want to be alone because they're nervous or whatever? So, one of the ways that I like to approach what a lot of people call separation anxiety is to encourage people to exercise their dogs before leaving them alone, whether that be a long walk, an hour of on and off fetch outside. Because I find that getting rid of a lot of I find that exercise reduces anxiety quite a bit in most dogs. Now, that might
Even
not be
for
good enough
humans
for humans as well.
as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Oh, we have everything in common with dogs. But we're both mammals. We have much more in common than we don't. People want to think we're so different than other mammals. And of course, we are in many ways. But yeah, not in that way.
Yeah. Okay.
But sometimes anxiety can be much more deeply rooted. I mean, dogs are not immune to mental illness like people either. So, that's where veterinary behaviorists may be able to come in, offer medication, offer some other ideas that might help with that individual dog, because we have to consider the individual case more than the breed, more than anything else.
Got it. So, coming back to food, and what do you think? And I've always been confused about this. What is the right food to give your dog? There's kibble, there's raw
Mhm.
food, and then there's home food that you kind of make for yourself, and then you take some out without the salt and the herbs, and you give that to the dog. What, in your opinion, is the healthiest thing to give your dog?
Pass. No, I'm just kidding. I'm only saying that because you have opened up a can of worms you cannot even begin to understand when you ask that question to a dog trainer. I'm not a nutrition expert. So, that's my disclaimer on that.
Let's talk about from your own personal experience. You have so
Sure.
many years of experience with dogs. What kind of food suits them the most from your experience?
Yeah, I think a lot of that depends on the individual dog. What we tell the public is that they should look for a food that's AFCO certified. That's a designation that the food has been formulated, that it's AFCO formulated, I think might be the correct word. You'll have to look up, it's AAFCO, I believe, the acronym. And that means that the food has been formulated in a way to make sure that dogs get the nutrients they need. So, I think kibble is vilified quite a bit. I think people need to consider different income levels when we're talking about nutrition for dogs when we bring kibble into the equation. But I think a fresh diet can also be very beneficial for a dog as well. I've used a combination of diets over the year. I give my dog broccoli, carrots, I'll give them fresh proteins. And yes, I will give my dogs kibble as well. So I kind of try to take the best one. And that's probably a terrible thing to do. I told you I wasn't a nutritionist, but I do my best to try and keep their diet relatively balanced. And, I do exercise them a lot.
Okay,
But
so let's put it this way.
mhm,
Apart from chocolate,
yeah.
what are one or two things you should never give your dog? As tempting as it feels, should just not give your dogs. Is bone, like the chicken bone, bad for dogs for their throat?
I'm told that cooked bones specifically are the bad ones because some people will do a raw diet, which is very controversial. I've heard both good and bad things about the raw diet. I'm agnostic on that until I learn more. Um, but yeah, there are things like cooked chicken bones you never want to give a dog. Things like macadamia nuts. In my book, actually, I have a pretty comprehensive list of common foods that are bad for dogs. But yeah, to be sure, fresh proteins and most vegetables and things like that are probably good for them. And of course, certified food or formulated food is supposed to be pretty good for them as well.
Awesome. What about sleep? Crate versus your own bed. I see a lot of people
Ooh.
making their dogs sleep with themselves in the bed. Not something I like doing, but
Mhm.
what is the right thing to do here?
It's up to you. I think that is so case by case. My dog sleeps in her dog bed at the foot of my bed most times. She's more than welcome to sleep with me. My other dog, Veronica, our little one, she'll definitely sleep in the bed. So I'm okay. I mean, what I always tell people is if it's okay with you, it's okay with me. I mean, that's your rules, your house. And if you want them to have their own designated sleeping area, that's perfectly understandable. I mean, dogs can be pretty dirty and hairy and everything else, and not everyone wants that in their bed. So I don't judge that. Doesn't
But
bother me
does
so
that
much.
affect their behavior? Do they become territorial?
I would say there's not any evidence that I'm aware of to support that. Because you're actually, yeah, you're pointing out some of the common mythology we've heard in the field, the dog training field related to dominance. Like if you let them go through a door first, if you let them sleep in your bed, if you let them eat first, they're going to think they're dominant. And so, no, there's no evidence to support any of that. You do what you want to do with your dog, but you're not going to mess them up by letting them on the furniture or letting them sleep with you.
Zach, to end things, I want to ask you one last question about random, unpredictable dog bites. Sometimes your own dog, and I've heard this from many people, in one incident in particular where a friend, she's a dog lover, dogs are very well trained, and one day out of the blue, her dog bit her face off and she had to get plastic surgery done. It was so out of the blue, so unpredictable. What could be the cause for something like this? Or are dogs generally unpredictable and we should always have our guards up?
Generally, no. Dogs are not always unpredictable. In fact, they're extremely predictable, generally speaking. When something, quote, out of the blue happens, it most often has something to do medically. There could be pain going on that we're oblivious to. Dogs don't show pain. They don't show they're suffering or that they have a stomach ache or that they have, a bone or arthritis or any of that. We don't necessarily get clued into that if we're not really, really looking for it. And it can take if you think about a person, think how we get much more irritable if we're sick or if we're not feeling well or, whatever reason. The dogs experience the same thing. Now, every case is different. Like in your case, you said that was a friend of yours or just
Yes, yes.
did we ever find out? I mean, what did the dog what happened after that? Do you
I
remember
mean,
or
it
not?
was basically, I think eventually the dog passed away after that incident, and pretty
Okay.
old dog. So I'm assuming that the dog must be sick now that you've said it. I never
Right.
really got into it.
Yeah, that is the simplest solution. That's usually we can trace it back to underlying pain that the dog is experiencing. So whereas in the past I could go up, I could hug my dog and, you know, even though I don't, we want to respect our dog's boundaries, but people do it anyway. And then if you do it at the wrong time where they're hurting, then they might be like, "Hey, back off, I'm in pain." And unfortunately, they don't know how to communicate that necessarily. So it's up to us to be really in tune with our dog's health.
Well, Zach, this has been wonderful and so insightful. Before we end things, can you give one piece of advice to someone who's just bringing home an 8-week puppy and also to someone who's adopting an older dog?
Okay, 8-week-old puppy, I'm going to say avoid giving them too much freedom too early. Particularly young puppies under the age of 8 months old are very often clingy. They want to be near us. So a lot of people will go in public with a young puppy and that puppy will stay right by them. And so they make the assumption, hey, my dog doesn't even need a leash. Look at this. They
Mhm.
stay right near me. That's common behavior. And maybe they will continue to do that. It's possible. But most dogs, when they hit about the age of 5 months and you start giving them that kind of freedom and that brain is starting to develop, we talk about how smart they are. They will look for those opportunities to go investigate, bolt on you, get into all sorts of trouble. So, too much freedom too early is a mistake I want people with puppies to avoid. You need to be on top of these dogs for the first 2 years of life or 2 years of training, even if you get an older dog.
Older dog, also the advice is the same, like like less independence.
I mean, it depends on the older dog. Some older dogs are chill and they're fine. You know, it really depends on their background. But I would say, yeah, if you're bringing an older dog, the broad rules apply. You're probably not going to be dealing with a lot of the puppy behaviors like potty training, though you could in a new place, depending on their background. Puppy biting, things like that aren't so much of an issue with most older dogs. So, really, just prioritizing exercising them, because I think exercise not only keeps them healthy, but it also reduces pent up energy. And dogs, broadly speaking, are pretty energetic little beings.
Hmm.
And I think exercise resolves 90% of unwanted behaviors anecdotally.
Wow.
And it also increases the bond with the dog. And that allows us to build communication.
Wow. Zach, this has been so amazing, and I've learned so much from you. So thank you so much once again.
Oh, I mean, what a privilege. I really appreciate it. Thank you for doing what you're doing.